first of all, it would take someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently, frequently likened President Trump to Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Karoline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will have equal time to Joe Biden when they both join us now at later this week in Atlanta.
When Karoline Leavitt took her seat under the glaring studio lights, she braced for battle. She knew this was enemy territory, a show notorious for fiery clashes, but she was ready to defend her ground. What she didn't expect was a moment so explosive that it would leave one of television's most dominant hosts utterly exposed. And it all happened live. No edits, no safety nets, no time for damage control, just raw, unfiltered chaos. Karoline had been invited onto Morning Current, a high-stakes political talk show where the debates weren't just heated, they were combustible. At the helm sat Paul Danning, a media powerhouse known for his ruthless, take-no-prisoners approach. He didn't just press his guests, he steamrolled them. His reputation was built on crushing opposition, twisting narratives, and making sure his version of the truth reigned supreme. But today, he wasn't in control. Facing him was Karoline Leavitt, a young conservative voice on the rise, sharp, fearless, and ready to hit back. She knew exactly what she was walking into and came prepared for war. From the second the cameras rolled, Danning came out swinging. He attacked her stance on media bias, accusing conservative outlets of spreading dangerous misinformation. He insisted that networks like his weren't pushing an agenda. No, they were simply correcting the record. It was the same old script, the same tired talking points. But this time, something was different, because Karoline wasn't backing down. Karoline didn't hesitate. She fired back with precise examples, citing instances where mainstream media had twisted narratives, left out crucial details, or outright misled the public. The exchange was sharp but professional, the kind of rapid-fire back and forth that viewers had come to expect. For a moment, it felt like just another debate, but then something shifted. Paul leaned in, his expression tightening, his tone sharpening. And in that instant, the entire conversation took an unexpected turn. Not Karoline, not the audience, not even the network executives saw it coming. Paul Danning's usual controlled aggression cracked. This wasn't just a heated discussion anymore, it was personal. His frustration erupted, his voice edged with something harsher, something unmistakably hostile. People like you, he snapped, his words carrying a biting undertone. You are the reason this country's backsliding. You push this fake narrative of victimhood, pretending conservatives are being silenced, when in reality, you're the one silencing everyone else. The studio fell silent. The usual rhythm of debate had dissolved into something weighty, something charged. Karoline blinked, her posture composed, but her eyes locked onto Paul like a blade finding its mark. She had handled intense interviews before, but this was different. She let the moment stretch, letting the tension settle, before she finally responded. Excuse me? Her voice was controlled, but the challenge behind it was undeniable. Paul didn't back down. If anything, he pushed forward. You act like free speech is under attack, but what you really want is control, he began. He stopped himself, but it was too late. The atmosphere in the studio had already shifted. Producers, who had been casually monitoring the segment, suddenly exchanged uneasy glances. Crew members, previously focused on routine operations, stiffened. The usual back and forth of a political debate had shifted into something else entirely, something that could go viral within minutes. The tension in the studio was palpable, and Karoline didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to cut him off. She simply leaned in, ever so slightly, and asked, "Would you like to clarify what you mean by your people?" The air in the room thickened. Paul hesitated just for a second. But in live television, a second can be career-defining. There was no edit button, no PR team rushing in with damage control. The cameras kept rolling, capturing everything. The internet was watching, and Paul Danning, a media veteran who had built his career on owning interviews, suddenly found himself in unfamiliar territory. His entire brand was about dominating discussions, cutting off his opponents, and steering the conversation exactly where he wanted. But right now, he wasn't in control. The moment those two words, your people, left his mouth,
I will say it's very easy to speak truth from this podium when you have a president who is implementing policies that are wildly popular with the American people, and that's exactly what this administration is doing. It's correcting the lies and the wrongs of the past 4 years, many of the lies that have been told to your faces in this very briefing room. I will not do that.
The energy in the studio shifted. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It wasn't just an awkward phrasing that could be brushed off. It was a loaded statement, the kind that, when clipped and posted online, would be dissected, analyzed, and replayed indefinitely. The kind that sticks. And Karoline knew it. She didn't flinch. She didn't pounce. Instead, she let the silence work for her. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap, watching, waiting. It wasn't just a pause. It was an opening, an invitation for Paul to clarify or collapse. Paul inhaled sharply. He needed to regain control fast. His response came quickly, almost too quickly. "I meant conservatives," he said, his tone slightly strained. "People like you, who push an agenda of grievance instead of progress." Karoline's expression didn't change, but the tilt of her head spoke volumes. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was deliberate, unwavering. "So, just to be clear," she said, her words slow and calculated, "when you said your people, you were referring only to political ideology?" Paul's jaw tightened. He had been in this business long enough to recognize a trap, and he knew so did the audience. If he pushed back too forcefully, he risked confirming exactly what people were already thinking. If he backed down, he looked weak. Either way, the damage was already done. The moment had slipped through his fingers. If he admitted it was a mistake, he looked weak. So instead, he did what seasoned debaters do best. He shifted the goalpost. "Oh, come on, Karoline," he scoffed, forcing a dry chuckle. He shook his head slightly, his tone dripping with condescension. "Don't play the victim here. This is exactly what I'm talking about, this bad faith outrage. You know exactly what I meant, but instead of engaging with the real argument, you'd rather twist my words and make it about you." Karoline didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him spin this into something else. She held his gaze, unshaken, unfazed. "I don't need to twist anything, Paul. Your words speak for themselves." The air in the room was thick with tension, but this was only the beginning. Across from her, something flickered across Paul's face, irritation, maybe even a trace of regret. But it was too late to walk it back. He had to commit. And that's when he made the fatal mistake. "You know what?" he snapped, his voice sharper now, frustration slipping through. "Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, we wouldn't be having this conversation." There it was, a sweeping, arrogant statement spoken in a moment of unchecked frustration. And it was broadcast live for the entire world to hear. The silence that followed was instant, suffocating, not just in the studio but on the other side of the screen, where thousands, soon to be millions, were watching in real time. Even Paul seemed to register the weight of his words the second they left his mouth. His lips parted slightly as if to soften the blow, to reframe, to take it back. But it was too late. Karoline let the moment stretch, the weight of his words hanging in the air before she delivered the final blow. "Are you saying conservatives don't contribute to society, Paul?" He exhaled sharply, rolling his shoulders back, his frustration barely concealed. "I'm saying this constant whining about being cancelled is exhausting. The damage was already done." Karoline nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. She didn't argue. She didn't push back. She didn't need to, because in that moment, the damage was already done. And within minutes, the fallout had begun. The clip wasn't just circulating, it was spreading like wildfire. The second the segment ended, social media lit up. The first clips and transcripts hit Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook all at once. A 15-second snippet just long enough to spark outrage, ignite debates, and set the internet on fire. Maybe if conservatives spent less time playing the victim and more time actually contributing something to society, it was unstoppable. No context, no prelude, just that one sentence. A loaded soundbite primed for controversy. Within an hour, the hashtag started trending. Hashtag fire Paul Danning. Hashtag media bias exposed. Hashtag Karoline was right. The narrative was out of his hands now. Social media erupted. Twitter threads dissected the exchange. TikTok users stitched the clip. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. And Facebook comment sections turned into battlegrounds. People took sides instantly. Some condemned Paul for what they saw as openly dismissive rhetoric, accusing him of media arrogance and elitism. Others scrambled to defend him, arguing that his words had been taken out of context, that the outrage was nothing more than manufactured controversy. But the full-length clip didn't help his case. If anything, it made things worse. The longer people watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It was a moment of frustration, a raw glimpse into how he really felt. And it was all caught on camera. Political commentators on both the left and right jumped in. Some called it out immediately, labeling Paul as yet another out-of-touch media figure dismissing the voices of millions. Others tried to spin the backlash, claiming it was nothing more than selective outrage, another example of conservatives playing the victim. But one thing was undeniable, people were watching. Then the sponsors got involved. By midday, pressure was mounting. Paul Danning's show had been pulling in strong ratings for years, but the backlash was growing louder. Several prominent advertisers pulled their ads, citing the incident as the reason for their decision. Without sponsorship, the financial pressure was immense. And just like that, a firestorm was born.